hear references every day to the Qur'an, the holy book of Islam. With me today is Dr. Holger Zellentin, and Holger is going to talk to us about the significance of legal traditions in the Qur'an. Holger, you're very welcome. Legal traditions in the Qur'an, why are they important?
Well, very simple. There's two reasons. One you mentioned already. They do get a lot of news, and since Islam as such is based on the Quran, the Sharia, the traditional Muslim law in all its aspects, it's quite a heterogeneous corpus actually, is based on the Quran in some way or another. And that study is well enlivened, has been done for centuries. There's a very sophisticated legal tradition around it. But that is not what I'm doing at all. I am looking at the Quran from the other way around. I am looking at the way in which the Quran as such relates to late antiquity as a whole, to the Jewish and Christian traditions, legal traditions especially. And I try to say, well, the Quran in its self-presentation is very clear in its being a confirmation of previous tradition. It says, I'm just saying something that has been given through Jesus, for example. And most scholars have either not paid attention to that, or they have either simply believed or disbelieved it and not looked at it in a historical context. And I would say the legal traditions in the Quran are actually a fascinating and powerful entryway to the study of this amazing document. In my own studies, I have come to see a very clear signs of both continuity and innovation vis-a-vis previous tradition. Now, let me lay this out. There's, if I say legal tradition, I mean, anybody can think about laws about divorcing, laws about how to bring up orphans, laws about what happens if somebody is caught stealing. Those are all laws. But if we look at the broader picture, things become even more exciting. If we look at law in its broader hermeneutical context, along the lines of nomos and narrative, if you know the recent turn in legal studies that would also emphasize the traditions around the law. Now, what we get in the Quran is a collection of laws that is entirely congruent, or almost entirely congruent, with biblical tradition, as embodied by the rabbis, by the Christians, and the Hebrew Bible. So that's kind of obvious in a sense, and that's the way the Quran has always been read. But if we look a little bit deeper, we do see that within this broad context of hundreds of laws embodied in the Talmud, and patristic, canonic law, everywhere, you actually can see a much more precise corpus that seems to have a privileged relationship with Quranic law, both in its aspects of actual laws and in its aspects of the hermeneutics around it, the stories being told. And that document is the Didascalia Apostolorum, which came into being somewhere in the 3rd century probably, first written likely in Greek. We have a few snippets here and there. It really took off in the Syriac tradition. That's where we find most manuscripts, many iterations. It was translated into several other Semitic languages later, Arabic among them, but that's probably post-Quranic, so we have to kind of dismiss that. We have a wonderful Latin translation as well. And so we find here both a focused legal corpus that enumerates laws and also a narrative in which it places these laws. And if we read that, not as a source of the Quran doesn't read that text, but it is part of the same specific legal tradition as this text, both in its specific laws and in the broader narratives in which it is presented. And that, I think, is a very helpful way to approach the Quran as a document that looks back to late antiquity and integrates what has been accepted, and it's very, there's nothing hidden about this. It's very clear, saying it is a confirmation of previous tradition. And Jews do this, the Christians do that, we do this, and it's clearly in conversation there. But it's also in conversation with this precise legal body, and it absorbs most of the laws and most of the narrative that's in there, in its own perspective, obviously. It's not dependent. It is part of the same conversation that was current in early 7th century Arabia.
So the Didascalia Apostolorum has been used by patristic scholars for centuries as a key to understanding the development of the Christian church in the period just before Constantine, and to make sense of the many of the churches even after that period. But what you're saying is that not only detailed, precise individual laws, say to do with fasting 2 days a week or something like that, but the actual whole story of law that is found in the Didascalia can become a key to understanding the origins of the Qur'an.
Absolutely. And again, origins, yes, but origins in the sense of not in this text, not in the written Didascalia as we have it, but in what it represents, in the shared legal assumptions, some of them explicit, some of them implicit, that the Didascalia is evidence for. Now let me give you a few examples what I mean by that, because it's a big topic, of course. So in the Didascalia, for example, we find the laws about veiling for women. We find the laws about not eating pork. We find the laws of washing after sex, washing before worship, and very specific ritual laws that the Quran fully endorses. Now, the Didascalia doesn't say, do that. It says, there's these people who do that. And these people, which are within the Didascalia's community, these are the people who actually seem to have the farthest reaching overlap in the legal observance that we also find in the Quran. So again, it's not a textual continuity, it is a shared framework. But at the same time, the numbers are actually quite simple. There's about, depends how you count. If I count the Quranic laws, there's about 35 in them. There's different ways of doing that. It's a very subjective. But of these 35 laws, we have about 30 which are named in the Didascalia, and 25 which the Didascalia says you should do. And of course, some of these are rather obvious. The 10 Commandments are there. Don't take usury. Don't charge interest when you loan out money. Things like that, which are widespread. There's nothing remarkable about that at all. But then, and even the veiling, you have that done by Byzantine women, by Zoroastrian women in Persia. It's quite a Arabian women already. So it's not remarkable. What is remarkable is that if you take all that together and look at the broader selection of these laws, and you get actually quite a large overlap, saying so there's 35 laws in the Quran, 30 are tested in the Didascalia, 25 the Didascalia says do, 5 additional ones, and that's actually specifically these ritual laws like abstaining from pork, washing after intercourse and before worship. What distinguishes the Quran ritually, the Didascalia says don't do. So it's quite something, and people in its community do them. Now that's the key point here. It is hence an evidence of a living tradition. And that living tradition, that is where I say, well, here we can actually trace the Quran, if you wish to use that term, and we can see a very specific precedent because these people actually seem to be observing 30 of the Quran's 35 laws, and the 5 extra ones, they can be traced specifically to the Quran's Arab context. So it is quite a large overlap. And together with that, we do get the broader stories. Now, finally, I'm answering a question. What is the broader context? Now, the Didascalia has a very interesting story about the history of law. It says the law was given by God, basically to all people, and especially to the Israelites. Now, the Israelites, they messed it up, as the Bible also says many, many times. And the key moment is the golden calf. The golden calf is the reason why God gave them additional laws. In the Didascalia's view, it's the entire Levitical corpus is a punishment for the golden calf. It's a view we also get in some patristic documents, but it's very central here. And then Jesus in turn comes to take away not law as such, as you often get in Christian tradition, but these laws specifically that were given as a punishment of the golden calf. So it's kind of, you have the eternal law, you get it stepped up as a punishment. Jesus comes, takes that bit away that was given as after the golden calf. And that's Jesus' role. He comes to abrogate that part of the law. And that seems to be his key role, to liberate people from the punishment laws, as if you wish. Now, this is exactly the same view we find in the Qur'an, which is something which has not been fully realized. But if you read carefully the surahs that explicate Jesus' role, Jesus has come to confirm what is before him, obviously. He has come to make lawful things that used to be forbidden. And some of the things are now lawful. Not all of the things, as in the Christian tradition, it's some of the things. And that story is being told in the context of the golden calf in wording quite similar to the Didache. So here we have the narrative, the broader narrative that justifies the law, that Jesus is the one taking away those extra laws the Israelites were given as punishment for the sin of the golden calf. And now we are going back to neutral. And this, what remains, is the universal law. So in that sense, the Didache and the Qur'an share both the broader narrative and the specific laws, most of it, not all of it. And I think the relationship here becomes quite crisp and clear, not as textual dependence, but as shared oral and legal culture.
So in looking at how one body of law imagines itself as law, we can actually see some of the key background to the Qur'an and to the way Muslims look on their own law.
So there is certainly a continuity here between the self-presentation of the law and between the laws themselves. That's correct. You said Muslim law. And there's a big caveat here, of course. I am speaking as a scholar of late antiquity. What happens with the Quranic law later is very complex. And I think the most exciting way of considering this is very broadly. Because what you see in the tradition that stands behind the Didache is a broader aspect to simplify law. And this goes back, in my view, to the Gospel of Matthew, where, and then the Didache, where Jesus is presented as making the yoke light, as taking away all the human additions to the divine law. And if you look at this development, it starts in the Gospel of Matthew, but then is iterated over and over again in the Didache, in the Didache, in texts, later texts as the Clementine homilies. You do get the sense, oh yes, no, the law is good, it's given by God, but God doesn't want us to be so complicated as the rabbis are. We want to make it light. And this actually is the one clear continuity you do get also in later Muslim jurisprudence, where you say, okay, God wants us to be pure, but he doesn't want us to get stuck in the details. And in that sense, if you look at a very broad picture, you do get actually a very clear sense of continuity from late antiquity through the Quran into the Muslim tradition.
Holger, thank you very much.